Good afternoon, Kennedale. It's Jeff Navarro's Kennedale News, and I have a special guest with me today. Normally, I don't do kind of national stuff. I don't want to lose half my audience, but since we have a local boy running for District 6 for Congress for the United States, I figure let's get the local boy on. That's news. So this is Adrian Mizher. Mizher, right? Mizher, I said right? Mizher, it's almost Jewish.
Mizher, yes.
Mizher.
Very close.
It's the Jewish
Mizher.
in me. I got to do the mitz. It's just it's ingrained in me. Um, Mizher. I said that right.
Correct.
Excellent. All right. And
Yep.
I appreciate you coming on the show. I just want to make sure that you had a little platform at least can communicate to your neighbors because the district's pretty large. It goes, for people who don't know, it's north side of Arlington down to us, and it's also Joshua over to us, and then down past Corsicana about 100 miles or so to that county line down there. So it's a pretty large, weird shaped district. And so I know there's just a lot of ground to cover. So I appreciate you coming on, Adrian.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So we'll just get right into it. I mean, there's what I believe there's 24 congressional candidates this year, and the reason why is because we're having a special election. Ron Wright had passed away last December, and in the state and for congressional seats, we don't appoint. Where if this happened to like Ted Cruz, the governor would appoint somebody for the senator. But for congressional seats, we just have a special election to finish off the term. And that's what's going on right now, correct?
Correct. That's exactly right. It's the people's house, and only the people are allowed to put somebody in that seat, not the governor.
Absolutely. So the issue is that we don't have a runoff, and thus there's 24 candidates. I believe there's 10 Democrats, 11 Republicans, 1 independent, and 1 libertarian.
Correct. Yeah. 23 candidates, actually. And you've got it exactly right. 11, 10, 1, and 1.
Okay. Okay. You're right. 23. And so that's why it's so busy, but that makes it very unique, correctly? Because basically most of these people are going to get 1%, 2% votes. I mean, if you get 5%, that's really good for this.
Yes. Anybody who pulls 5% is doing very well, because it's going to, the vote is going to be so splintered and scattered. And because it's a special election, I don't think very many people even know it's happening. So I think the voter turnout is going to be low. So every vote here is going to matter much more than in a normal cycle.
That's right. Traditionally, our city elections are, way less, or local elections way less than our national elections, except for last year where we mixed it all at the same time. It was the biggest voting day in the history of this city for sure, and the United States. Which goes to show why we should.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges?
It's an unusual situation, and it's an unusual situation. The early voting actually is going to start tomorrow and run for 8 days, and then the election day is on Saturday, May 1.
Right around the corner. So what's some of the challenges you've seen, like going for the congressional seat? I know you've done this before. So even versus the last time versus this time, what are some of the challenges in a 23-person race?
Well, I've certainly done a lot more this time than last time. Let me explain real quick what happened last time. For the election of 2018, so it was the summer of 2017 that I decided I was going to run in the 2018 election. So I went and found out, I didn't know how to run for political office before, so I went and looked it up and found out that there were 2 ways to get on the ballot. One was to collect the signatures needed. You needed 500 signatures for the House of Representatives, or to pay the $3,125 fee. I frankly was annoyed that you could pay a fee and get on the ballot. I don't think that's the right way to get things done. It's the people's ballot. You should get the people's permission to get on it. So that's what I was planning to do anyway, was get the signatures. I'm proud to say I'm the only one during that cycle of what was 12 Republican candidates at that time who got the signatures. Everybody else paid the fee. However, when I went down to Austin and drove my signatures down there, even though I had them review it and look at it in front of me and they blessed it and said it was fine, they called 3 days later, the day after the deadline, to let me know that there was a small clerical error on my paperwork. And so I was not allowed to appear on the ballot then. So that was the end of that campaign. This campaign, I am going to be on the ballot, and therefore I've been attending all of the candidate forums and debates and appearing in front of any audience that will have me, such as this one with you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And so this has been a very different experience than that, where I just collected the signatures last time, but did not appear on the ballot. And here I'm actually going to be on the ballot and be asking for people's votes. So it's definitely a different experience than it was coming up on 4 years ago, the last time I dipped my toe into these waters.
So I know you're definitely making a splash on the south side of Arlington. How do you feel you're doing just south of DFW?
Yeah, down in Ellis County and Navarro County. I have appeared down there, I think twice at 2 forums in Ellis County, and now we've got to be approaching half a dozen times. I was just in Corsicana again last night. So I've been in Navarro County quite a bit. I've made several connections, especially in Navarro County, and then a few less, but quite a few also in Ellis County. So I've been meeting with people, asking to go to their houses or meeting them at restaurants so that they can get to know me and tell their friends. And then, like I also said, have attended several of the candidate forums, a few that have been held in each place. So I think my name is getting out there in both of those counties, Navarro and Ellis. And as you said, I'm got signs all over the place here in Tarrant County, as well as meeting with people. And this is where I know a lot of people, not only here in my hometown of Kennedale, but because of the church I attend over in Arlington, it has given me some inroads to a lot of connections there. So there's a lot of word of mouth campaigning going on that I've been asking for friends to tell friends to tell friends. And
Billboard, right?
it's hard to get a measure of how well that's working because nobody reports to you and says, yeah, I've heard from so-and-so, but I have some indication that is working somewhat. So hopefully it's doing well and the word's getting around and people are getting to know me better.
So why Congress? I mean, you could have started off on a local or even state. Why jump to the big arena?
Sure. The question I get a lot is, how come your first foray into politics is for national office? That seems
I think the
unusual.
question is why are you foolish?
It's what I know. Good point. It's a good point. Why am I foolish enough? It is what I know. It's what I am expert at in the subjects and the issues that pertain to things. I am not expert at the issues of our city of Kennedale. And I also don't believe in lying to voters and saying, hey, I want this office when you really don't. What you really want to do is just use it as a stepping stone to get to a bigger office and then to get a bigger office after that. That's what a career politician is going to do. I do not want to ever, even if I become a career politician and am in politics for a long time, I never want to act like it. Now, I have certainly considered, and especially more recently, strongly running for state office. So that is not off the table in my future, perhaps. I do understand those issues as well. But the reason to run for national office is because, again, that's what I'm most expert at. That's what I can speak to the people about. And frankly, I think it's unfortunately our biggest problem in government right now because the federal government is far too large. I wish that our state and local politicians had more influence over our lives. Now, they have significant influence. I don't want to say they don't, but I wish they had even more. Those are the politicians whose names we should know. Those are the politicians who should be making the news that we care about. And we should care far less than we do as a nation about our national politicians because they should be doing far less than they are trying to do. And we should not give them as much power and importance as we do currently.
So I know you would agree with me on that. Like our national leadership is just deadlock right there. There's no communication. There's no communication. I said that. There's no like compromise going. So and we always hear candidates coming in like, oh, I'm going to go there and fight liberalism and do all this stuff. But I think it really comes down to that compromise. What do you think you can do different versus the other 22 of you to try to help loosen that landlock in Congress?
I'm happy to answer the question of what I can do different than the other 22, or at least what I think I can do different. I don't know if this answer is going to help with the landlock, the gridlock,
Sure.
And the lack of working together that is going on there. I think that what I bring to the table better, not necessarily different, because some of the other 22, many of which I have met, also can do this well. But what I think I do best of the entire group is the ability to communicate why smaller government solutions are effective. I find most people who vote Democrat, who vote liberal, who vote leftist, they do so because they have been, in what I my opinion, tricked into thinking that that is the best way to help the poor and the less fortunate and the downtrodden. Many of them have great motives. They want to be, and certainly my Christian belief leads me to want to be like Jesus. And many people I find want to be like him too and help the poor and the less fortunate than themselves. And unfortunately, they have been tricked into thinking that Washington, D.C. is the best way to get that done. If you find out what they're passionate about and why they vote the way they do, that has been, in my experience, the most common answer, is because this is the way to help the poor. And they look at Republicans, they look at conservatives as racist, bigoted, homophobic, haters, people who don't care about the poor, people who just want to help the rich and buy a fourth yacht because three somehow isn't enough. And that's their viewpoint of Republicans. And I think I'm best at communicating to those kind of people, hey, I get the issues you're about, and I care about those too. I want everybody to have health care. I want everybody to be well educated. I want all people to be fed. I want to help our environment and make it clean. And I want to do the things that keep our natural resources protected. But I believe, based on experience and history and reading of history that I didn't experience, the best way to get that done is to provide freedom and liberty and opportunity to people to run their own lives rather than to have it run by Washington, D.C. If the federal government did less, I believe all of those problems that currently we look to the federal government to solve, I think those problems would be alleviated, never eliminated. We are never going to eliminate poverty. We are never going to eliminate sickness. We are never going to eliminate all of these problems. But I think they would be alleviated much better with local control, personal effort, personal responsibility, each of us in our neighborhoods helping each other, rather than looking to the federal government to solve these problems. And if a government needs to be used, if the churches and the charities and your neighborhood organizations have not gotten it done and you are not getting it done person to person, that will happen too, rather than let somebody fall through the cracks and live a miserable life. If a government needs to be involved, it should be a local government, or at best the state government, who can be far more responsive to both the needs of the person who needs the help and of the taxpayers, to make sure that their money isn't getting wasted and is actually going to the thing that we intended it to go to help people.
Sure. Sure.
So I think that communication, the ability to express those ideas, I think I do that better than the other candidates. I think I'm able to turn the issue in a way to explain to people who would normally want to vote Democrats, say, hey, no, here's why the Republican, if you want to call it that, I'm not a big fan of those labels, but the conservative, the constitutional way is actually the most effective at solving that problem that you're claiming to want to solve.
And I always say we have 50 different personalities. It's kind of hard to make one rule for all. The values of Texas is not the values of New York, for example. It's not even the values of Georgia, and I've lived in all these places. So, and it's better that the states, deal with the states. But that's the biggest difference between Democrat and Republicans. The only difference is one believes in big federal government to solve the problems, and one believes in less federal government and more states' rights to solve the problems.
Correct.
I believe both sides, whether you're liberal or conservative, want the same goals, like you said. Help our neighbors out, feed the poor. Bring us fellow Americans up where maybe our level or where my level is to the next person up, all the way up to Elon Musk or the guy who owns Amazon. And that's the American dream, right? Is to as a country, we're fine, but we're looking at it internally. But that's I think the biggest difference is we all want the same goal. And if you turn off the news, you turn off the rhetoric, and listen to each other, you'll hear that we want the same goals. We just have different ways of doing it.
Yes.
And that's where compromise comes in, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm better at explaining that to normal people. I am going to certainly run into the roadblocks when you talk to the professional politicians. They're not listening to anything each other is saying. They're just out trying to get more votes, and they're trying to gin up support for their preferred point of view and grind their political axe. So whether I'd be able to go to Congress and actually convince those people, I doubt it, because their minds are already completely locked into their partisan ways. And rather than searching for truth, most of them are just interested in getting reelected and making sure that they're in the majority.
I think we also live in coming out of a great decade, moving into another great decade when it comes to social mentalities. For example, like if you were in music in the 90s, you had to go through a record label. You prayed that somebody found you on the national scene. But after 2000, the first second decade, there was YouTube. There was all these things where you could post your music and then
Mhm.
you saw people producing and making their own music and distributing and becoming their own distributors. And so that grassroots mentality is where I'm going with this. That is what we all have, and indeed, in the last 12 years on the national level, you've seen grassroots, whether good or bad, or you agree with it or not, on both sides. Do you think that your campaign is that kind of grassroots mentality, and you think that that is a pro?
Well, it's definitely hard to get more grassroots than I am. I have no paid staff on the
Sure.
campaign, none, zero. It is definitely me, my family, my friends, those who are willing to volunteer to help me, who have been out spreading the word, putting up signs, doing the work, passing out flyers, going door to door, which we're going to do later this evening. Those kinds of things are being done all on a volunteer basis. So if this campaign is going to work, which I hope it will, it's going to be God's blessing, God's gift, God's miracles, and that of grassroots effort. Certainly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the first one that comes to mind of somebody who has gone from
Presley?
previously unknown, a nobody, to somebody who is very, very much world famous. I would like to think of myself as her opposite on our side of the aisle. Um, Somebody who's able to bring that kind of excitement, somebody's able to pull the lever that direction. While she gets criticized for not, even by liberal websites I've seen, for not having produced legislation and being one of the least effective Congress people, I've seen people with that attitude. I find it to be the opposite. And I think her skill set is what my skill set is, which is the ability to convince people to set the standard out in what appears to be a far reaching radical way, but it is the flag planting that people will follow. And she has done that for the left side. And she has definitely moved the conversation, in my opinion, in a very poor direction, but much farther to the left because of her attitude. And I would like to think of myself, not like to think of myself, I know I could do the same thing if given the opportunity to pull us back towards, and I don't like to think of it as the right. I really don't like that analogy. You're far left extremist. Okay, Adrian, that makes you far right extremist. To me, the Constitution and the principles that it lays down, that's always been the middle. And the
Sure.
entire conversation has shifted left, where somebody like me who believes in following the Constitution strictly is now considered a radical right winger. I don't know how we have allowed this conversation to shift the entirety of it to the left. But I completely reject that. I do not see myself as radical. I do not see myself as extreme. I guess nobody does. They probably all will say the same thing.
Sure.
But I honestly,
I'm sure Ocasio Cortez says that about herself.
why the entire paradigm has shifted. Yeah, I'm sure she does. I am sure that she does. But I don't know why the entire paradigm has shifted away from following what it says in the Constitution. I like the quote that is ascribed to Ben Franklin. A lot of quotes get ascribed to our founding fathers or Abraham Lincoln. Who knows whether they actually said them? But this one ascribed to Ben Franklin is what I consider myself. I consider myself to be an extreme moderate. And I think following the Constitution and its principles is the middle of the road. That is what moderate is. And that's where I assign myself.
Ben Franklin was kind of a rebel, actually. Well, I'll call him a pro instead. So you open the door.
He was definitely that. He was definitely that.
Uh,
On that, I will differ from him.
who's your favorite founding father? If you go read, basic principles, Constitution, who do you go to? Do you go to Jefferson, Madison? Who do you go to?
Well, both of those, and in that order. I like Jefferson and Madison. I would say that Jefferson comes first when he writes the Declaration of Independence. To me, that is the foundational belief system of what America is. The Constitution, mostly written by Madison, stands atop that. So I will take those two in the lead. I mean, I love Washington and Franklin and Adams and a whole bunch of the others as well. But I will take those two in the lead, what Jefferson and Madison had to say. That is Americanism. Now, I also am a Bible believer. I believe in the Bible. I am a Protestant Christian. And I think that is also a foundational belief of what they then put Americanism on. But we Bible believers cannot claim that we are a theocracy. We do not follow the Bible in every way. America's top value, America's number one priority is liberty and freedom. And that is not the Bible's top priority.
No, it's community.
So again, I believe in both things, but if we are going to run for the American government, if we are going to follow what our founding principles were, the number one thing we must be focused on is maximizing freedom and liberty for each and every person.
All right, so why don't you cover some of the hot topics around I'll let you go ahead and just pick and choose. I know I've seen some of your videos, so I know you've got pretty much a good speech going. So I'll give you your opportunity to plug your audience.
Gladly. Certainly the number one issue for Congressman Mizher is going to be to shrink the size of the federal government. I've already been talking about it here during our time together. That is the number one problem that our country faces, is the gigantic, out of control federal spending and budget. And it is a problem for both Republicans and Democrats. Again, going back to why I believe myself to be the best candidate, we need somebody here, such as Congressman Thomas Massie out of Kentucky or Senator Rand Paul out of Kentucky. They both just coincidentally happen to be from Kentucky. But to me, those are the politicians leading the way in terms of principled action, principled points of view. While they happen to be Republican, they take as many bullets from their own side as they do from the opposite side. And that's the kind of politician I want to be, is somebody who stands on the principles to shrink the government back within its constitutional limitations, even if that annoys people within your own party, which it's certainly going to. During our lifetimes, how much have we heard the Republicans complain about big government when it comes to election time? Talk about, yeah, I want a small government. And it's never happened. Never, ever in my lifetime has the government shrunk. And I want it to do that. I don't want just what Washington calls shrinking, which is a slower rate of growth. I want actual smaller federal government. And Republicans have had 8 years of my 42 years on this planet. Have they held all the levers of government, presidency, Senate, and House of Representatives? That was from 2000 to 2006, and again from 2016 to 2018. And during all of those 8 years, they spent more money just after having complained about a Democratic administration or Congress before them. They spent more money during those times than the people they've been complaining about before. So,
Sure.
while certainly Joe Biden is blowing even that out the door in his spending, we conservatives cannot pretend like the Republican Party has followed its claim to want smaller government. So that is going to be the focus that I am on, like white on rice. I will never leave that, even if it's something that annoys people within my own party, because that must be stopped and that must be cleaned up. If we're ever going to win on any of the other issues, which I'm going to pivot to here in just a second, we have to win on that. If you aren't willing to do that, and I'll use Donald Trump since he's so famous as a recent example, I have a long list of things that I think Donald Trump did well, and a small list of things that I think Donald Trump did poorly. But the one thing he did poorly, which is not shrink the size of the federal government, is so important to me that it overwhelms all of the other things. And that is why he didn't earn my vote in either time that he ran for president. I did not vote for him. And to me, any public servant that is not willing to shrink the size of the federal government, even if they're right about everything else, they are of no value to me as my public servant, because we're just going to get overwhelmed and buried under tyrannical federal government anyway, even if you have the right opinions about these other subjects. Something else that we need to talk about, a hot topic nowadays, election integrity. I mean, it is absolutely true that that is so foundational to us surviving as a republic at all. If we can't trust the results of the election, if we don't think that my vote was counted properly and fairly, if we think people who shouldn't have been voting because they're dead or not registered or illegal, even if we think that's happening, that's a problem. And we have to clean up our elections. We have to clean up election integrity. Do I have evidence? Have I seen evidence? And do I have it to prove that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump? The answer is no. So I am not going to go to that extreme, what I consider to be extreme, to say that was absolutely stolen. I can't say that. I believe it was. I think enough shenanigans went on, but that's an opinion. I don't really have proof of that. So therefore, it's not actionable, which is going to lead to another hot topic is, what is your opinion of January 6th and the supposed insurrection that happened? I put it in quotation marks because it only is an insurrection if the election wasn't stolen. That's the key question. It's not, did these people do what was right? The answer to that question flows directly from, was the election back in November stolen or was it legitimate? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that it was. I don't know that it wasn't. And I'm frustrated with people who say one or the other completely definitively, because I don't think they know either. And I don't like the shutting down of discussion and argument about that. I think we need actual investigation into whether what happened was correct or not. And once you determine that, then you will know whether the people who acted on January 6th were insurrectionists or freedom fighters. For example, in 1773, when they threw the British harbor key into the harbor, What are those people? Are those people rebels or are they patriots? It all depends on your perspective. And the same is true of January 6th. We can only judge what they did if we know the underlying cause. We may never know that. I condemn those people in what they did on January 6th because of the fact that we don't know, and I don't believe they knew either. Only if you know, like you know your own name, that that election was stolen from you, does it then give you warrant for such kind of violence and physical action as they took. So I condemn them because I don't believe they know that. But the question of whether what they did is right is only determined if we can definitively determine what happened in November was accurate or not. So election integrity is a huge deal. Now, I also need to say this, which is something that Republicans and our former president didn't hit on enough. Election integrity is a state issue. We conservatives like to throw around the Constitution. I certainly do. I claim it all the time, and we've got to follow it all the way. And if we want this problem solved, we can't then use the federal government hammer, like was nonsense that was said was going to happen on January 6th, to say decertify the election, Congressman, decertify the election, Vice President. That's ridiculous. If it all comes down to the Vice President, in the end, Mike Pence could say, you know what? I don't certify this. I don't know why we bothered to have the election. Why do we have people voting? Why did we have the Electoral College? Why did we go through all that? Why didn't we just wait till January 6th and ask Mike Pence who the next president was going to be? That's always ridiculous. That's not what the Constitution says. This is a state matter. We need to be letting our state legislators deal with it. If it was cheated in November, they need to find that out and they need to correct it. They are the ones who need to pass the laws and make sure that they are enforced by their respective governors to make sure that doesn't happen again. So that's my feeling. I don't have a clock in front of me. I hope I'm not going to be running over our time. I tend to talk a lot, but I'll move on to number 3 that I find to be very important. This one isn't going to take very long, but that's the murder of unborn babies. I don't even use the word abortion when I come to this subject. To me, it is a very cut and dry issue. That is murder, and I cannot stand for it. And no matter what legal justification you think you're going to give it, I don't care. That is the murder of a child, and I will never put up with it. I will never apologize, and I will never back off my strong feeling on it. Now, to talk to those who feel differently, I always hear their arguments, and to me, they are all distractions from this one question. And why my opinion is so strong, because the answer to this question for me is yes. Is the thing growing inside of that woman alive or not? That's the only question that matters on this subject. Is it alive? If it's alive, we can't kill it. I don't care why you have this live thing in you. If it's alive, we should never kill it unless you're really faced with the life of the mother and the baby at stake. If you're choosing between life and life, now I will let the people in the room, the mother, the family, the doctor, make that decision. I don't want to be involved in that decision that's happening right there in the moment. But if that's not the case, it doesn't matter what else has happened or is going to happen. If it's alive, you can't kill it. And if it's not alive, which a lot of the supposedly pro-choice, I don't like that word either. To me, it's pro-death, crowd will say is, if it's not alive, then you're right. Then you're welcome to cut it out as if it was any other tumor growing inside the woman. So that is the key question. Again, we have to distill all of these issues down to what is really going on. And that's the key question. Is it alive? Is it not alive? In my opinion, it is. Therefore, it's murder. It can't happen. The next thing that I see as important on our national agenda, immigration. This gets a whole lot of attention from all sorts of politicians. And I will find that if you're a Republican, you have to say, I hate illegal immigration. I want to shut it down and lock down that border. And the tougher you can be, the tougher you can sound on it, the better your audience likes it. And if you're a Democrat politician, I notice that they all say, I want as much immigration as we can get. I don't want any rules on it. Let's let people come in here. And they act as if that's the compassionate thing to do. And the more open they can sound like they want to make the borders, the better their audience likes it. But yet, if both sides are accused, if Republicans are accused of saying you hate immigrants, they will deny it. If Democrats are accused of saying you want open borders, they will deny that. Yet if you listen to their rhetoric, they sort of sound like that. That's kind of what they want to advertise to their base. You're not going to find anybody more against illegal immigration than Adrian Mizher. I don't want illegal immigration. I think it is a travesty that we have allowed it for so long and put up with it. However, I think the key to this issue, and where Republicans fail in their talking points, is they should be leading with what I'm about to say here, is that I love immigration. I love immigrants and I want more immigration than we have. I want people to come here. I believe in what the Statue of Liberty says, and I want the huddled masses from the world, the tempest tossed, the people that nobody else wanted and that want to be here because it's better here than it is where they can. I want those people here. I believe in the promise of America and freedom and liberty. And I'm sorry I get emotional when I talk about this, but
Me too.
I so strongly love that concept. You might have not amounted to anything where you came from, but here you can be somebody. Here you can rise to the level that your talent will take you. Here you will matter to us. You do not have to have been related to George Washington to be an American. I don't care where you came from or what your background is. You can be every bit as American as any of the rest of us. You just have to get here. You just have to want to. America is an idea. It's not a place. It's the idea of personal liberty and personal responsibility and personal value and freedom that may not have run the place that you came from, but that is what runs our place. We want immigrants. We Republicans should be talking more about that, how we love and want immigrants, but we want them legally. And my biggest problem with our immigration system now, and what I think is the best way to stop illegal immigration, the wall, I can debate, I can take it or leave it, honestly, whether we have a wall. The best way, in my opinion, to stop illegal immigration is to make the legal immigration system simpler, quicker, and less expensive. It is far too complicated and difficult for most people to immigrate to the United States. And I know for a fact, anecdotally, I know a lot of immigrants, both legal and illegal. My wife immigrated from Mexico when she was a preteen. Her parents brought her over here some 30 years ago, and her siblings. She has since become a legal immigrant, but at the time she was not. So a lot of family related to her has also come. And so I'm very intimately aware of this issue and how it affected their lives. And I know that almost everyone who immigrates here would do so legally if it was simpler and the same or less expensive than it was to do so illegally. So I think that's our biggest problem here. We need to recognize that we created this issue. I always use this analogy, Jeff, and again, apologize for going on so long. But the analogy I use, I know you have children, I have children. If you put cookies out on the table and you have your young children there and you say, no cookies, well, of course they want the cookies. And so they're going to try to sneak them when you're not looking. So your young child comes by and they grab a cookie off the table thinking you're not looking. They look up, oh, and they see, oh, dad is watching me. Oh man, I'm about to get in trouble. So they see you, they recognize that you see them, they're waiting to get in trouble, but you don't say anything. And they're amazed. Oh, I thought he said no cookies, but he's not getting me in trouble. Okay, I'll eat it. So they eat it. They see you see them eat it and you don't do anything. And they thought, I'm confused. He said not to do it, but I did it and he didn't say anything. So later that afternoon, they do it again. Well, he didn't last time. Let me try again. And the second cookie comes up. And again, they see you see them and you don't say anything. And that happens the next day and the next day until all the cookies on the table are gone. And then on the fourth day, they go to get the last cookie and you tell them, I told you 4 days ago, no more cookies. You start smacking them around in punishment. Whose fault is it that the cookies were eaten? Are we going to blame the child? No, that's the bad authority figure. The authority figure made a rule and then openly didn't enforce it, not just out of neglect or I'm too busy or I didn't see you. They openly did not enforce their rule. Well, what do you expect? But more rule breaking. The kid wants the cookie and they're going to get it unless you are going to enforce your rule. This is our fault. We've made this situation. We cannot blame these people who came here illegally. I put that in quotation marks as I can remember a few years ago watching a congressional hearing and they have somebody sitting there on the little chyron underneath that says the person's name and then it calls them illegal immigrant. And I said, you're there in front of the lawmakers and you're supposedly doing something illegal and they don't do anything about it. If you were a thief or a murderer and you were testifying before Congress and we were looking for you to get, oh, there he is right there, arrest him. They don't. These people aren't really illegal. This is our fault. We've created this mess. So for us now, we Republicans say, okay, now I want to enforce it. That isn't right. That isn't fair. That is not just. And it's not American. It's not constitutional. It's not any of the things we conservatives say we want to be. It is cruel. It is mean. And it is unacceptable. So again, I might get attacked from the right for being too soft and wanting amnesty. They'll call it that. We'll remember when Reagan gave amnesty and how we got burned. The problem wasn't giving the amnesty. The problem was not then stopping the bleeding after you did it. You got to do one thing first. We must shut down illegal immigration. Again, nobody will be stronger on that issue than me. I will be right there with everybody else to say, let's try anything and everything. I want E-Verify. I want more agents on the border. I want more technology on the border. I want better enforcement, because most illegal immigrants don't even come across the border. Most illegal immigrants come here legally and then become illegal later. I want more enforcement of all of our rules, but we can't be so uncompassionate as to say, now we're going to so quote send you home. I don't like that phrase either. If you've come here illegally, you must be sent. Look, if the person came here at 7 years old and they're now 37, let's be honest, what's home? Here is home, not there. Mm-hmm. To call that home is ridiculous. We sound ridiculous when we say that. The Democrats' favorite thing to tell us is that we're a bunch of racist, bigoted, xenophobic, sexist, horrible, narrow-minded, Hitler-like Nazis. That's, of course, nonsense. We are not those things, but we are very dumb when we give them the very bat that they're going to hit us with. Some of our rhetoric on immigration does that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a mistake on our part. We need to concentrate on saying, I want the legal immigration system to be quicker, simpler, and less expensive. You should not need a lawyer to immigrate to the United States. It should be very, very simple. There should be a list of very few things, maybe half a dozen. You do this, and then you get in line and wait, because again, we'll have more people wanting to do it than we can actually take in. I get that. That is how you immigrate to the United States. And then it'll be very easy to show who is not doing it right. And the last thing I want to say about immigration is I think we need to follow the Ellis Island model. Everybody is familiar with Ellis Island and how that worked. My great-grandfather, for example, came through there. Mm-hmm. A physical location to me is very important. So again, it's very obvious who is doing this right and who is doing it wrong. Now, we have too many immigrants nowadays to try to get away with one physical location. So we probably need a couple on each of our 4 borders. But you should have to go there if you want to immigrate. Let's say it's in El Paso. If you have the immigration center in El Paso and you try to cross at Brownsville, well, you're automatically illegal. I don't have to worry about whether you're getting asylum. I don't have to worry about what you're claiming. I don't have to worry about why you say you're coming. I'm sorry. No, the immigration system's over there. You need to go there. And that's where we have enough judges and enough caseworkers and enough space to process you. Again, if it was done so simply like that, we would all then know. And I just said that was the last thing. Here's the last thing I'm actually going to say about immigration. If you can't go to your neighbor who is an intelligent person and say, how do you immigrate to the United States? And they tell you, which I'll bet hardly anybody, if anybody listening to us, I know I couldn't, then our immigration system is too complex. If they can't tell you, hey, you got to fill out form J279, you've got to go to this location, you've got to make sure you don't have a communicable disease, you got to make sure that you can prove that you're not have a history of criminality, and give you the 5 or 6 simple things, then the immigration system is too complex. And again, most people listening to us right now, if not everyone, could not tell you in specific how to immigrate to the United States. They'd tell you in general, and then they'd refer you to a lawyer, and that's a problem. So that's my long-winded answer on immigration. The last subject I want to touch on,
go ahead,
and it's not last because it's least important, although frankly, in light of these other things, maybe it is, but this subject of race relations is something that I find is the biggest separator between us normal people, those who vote Republican, and those who vote Democrat. Now, the politicians, the professional politicians, I don't believe a word they say. I don't think any of them care about people of color. I don't think any of them care about helping out the justice system. They just use that as an act. Democrats will claim to in order to get people of color to vote for them. I think the track record shows they don't give a whit about that. But I do find this to be, for the most part, normal people, us regular guys, regular women who live in regular life and aren't politicians. We get along and we agree on what I've already said. Shrinking the federal government, most people say, yeah, that's a good idea. We should treat election integrity. Should they be fair and open and honest? Everybody, of course they should. Immigration, should it be simpler and should we welcome? Of course, everybody will say yes to that. Should we murder babies? Again, that's the question. Is it a baby? And everybody else, well, no, we shouldn't be murdering babies. So you can find common ground on all the other 4 I've said, but this I have found is the big separator between us normal folks. I have strained and lost friendships over this subject and not the others. and other subjects that I'm not talking about, gun control and that kind of thing, you can find reasonable or at least agreement to disagree. But on this subject, we have to do a lot of work. And when I say work, again, I don't mean the kind of work that most people talk about, which is legislation and the federal government actually doing something. I mean work on our soul. Our national soul needs to be worked on this subject. This is causing to me to be sad and angry at the separation is making amongst us normal folks. In my lifetime, I will again give my experience. I was born in the late 70s. I have no memory of the 70s, but I do remember the 80s, and I can remember the last throws. Fortunately, I missed out on the 60s and all the nonsense that my parents and their generation were doing then. But I remember seeing what I hoped were the last throes of the racial argument in this country. In the early 60s, there were still plenty of places in this country where you could hang a black man from a tree in plain sight and nothing would ever happen to you. By the early 70s, Archie Bunker was the most popular because he was being ridiculed character on television. The great transformation that we did in that short decade, thank God for those people of all colors and stripes and political viewpoints that fought that fight and won that legal battle to change us from the horrible racism of before the 60s to the laughed at, ridiculed, made fun of a racist by the time the 70s came around. Was everything healed by the time All in the Family was popular? No. But again, by my childhood through the 80s, I was seeing what I hoped were the last throes of this national discussion. And I felt that the right side, the non-racist side, obviously the right side, was winning. We move into the 90s. Everybody who lived then will remember Rodney King and the horrific sight we saw of those policemen just beating the snot out of this man. And I remember I was a teenager at the time thinking, I don't care what he did. There is no need, none, zero for what I watched on television. I don't care what happened. I don't care how much he resisted arrest. I don't care. I can see with my own two eyes what you people are doing. It is disgraceful. Now, were riots the right answer to that? Of course not. But that is what's going to happen. I do agree with Dr. King. Rioting oftentimes is the language of the unheard. If you've angered everybody and they said, I've tried to do it right, I'm still getting beaten, naturally, that is the response all of us would have if we thought we've tried the right way and it's not working. Again, just ask the people who acted on January 6th. They felt the same. Whether they were justified or not is up for discussion. So I remember Rodney King very clearly. And then I remember the response to Rodney King, which was the O.J. Simpson trial, a man who was so obviously guilty of murder. Everybody knew it at the time. It was not, we were not confused as a nation. We knew what had happened. We knew this man had killed her. But there were plenty of people, including the people on that jury, who didn't care. And I've heard the jurors, a couple of them anyway, afterward, literally shrugged their shoulders and, well, you knew he was guilty. Yeah, well, this was in response to Rodney King. We wanted make-up justice for that. So I was, again, disappointed and appalled, but hoping that this was the end. And then I remember this long period from what was OJ, of 95, 96, somewhere around there, mid-90s. I call it the period from OJ to Trayvon. Trayvon Martin happened in 2012. And during that period of about 15-ish years, I was very hopeful. These were my late teenage years and into my early adulthood now, all through my 20s. I can remember thinking many times, man, I don't hear very much about race in the news. It's wonderful. Thank goodness that my children and their friends, these little 2, 3, 4, 8-year-olds, have never seen a live story that has race as its primary component. And I thought we're finally getting rid of this. So we have finally defeated this and put it behind us. And then I've been so disappointed in the last decade since Trayvon, when we have had so many stories now where race is the primary subject and it is splitting us asunder. And I am very disturbed by that. We need more honesty on this subject. We need more conversation on this subject. So all that set up to say, we can go through these each one by one. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, all the other names that we have seen in the news. We can go through those one at a time, but there is so much dishonesty around this subject. It drives me crazy because that is what is leading to the national pain we are experiencing. We cannot be honest on this subject. Everybody, even us normal people, politicians always act this way on every subject, but I find us normal people being very dishonest on this subject, and that is what pains me. We must recognize and not deny the fact that there is such a large percentage of people in prison that are people of color. That can't be denied. That's true. Why is that? And those of us on the right should not try to run away from that fact. Let's deal with that fact, which should also be recognized from the left. How many of these situations does race have nothing to do with it at all? You're just making it up. I can remember George Zimmerman being called a white Hispanic in order to make it seem like he killed Trayvon because he was black. That kind of dishonesty is nonsense. I can remember with Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot. That's not what happened. He was reaching for the policeman's gun. Obama's Justice Department found it. But yet, what did I see? All the athletes with the t-shirts on and the hands up, don't. That's baloney. There is baloney being peddled on both sides of this subject, and it is very detrimental to our national soul. It pains me a great deal. And I hear a lot from the left. Are you white people willing to have uncomfortable conversations? But I want to challenge those on the left. You need to have some uncomfortable conversations. You need to be uncomfortable. This country is not driven and controlled by white supremacy. That is complete nonsense. This country was not started in 1619. That is complete nonsense. This country was not built, its prosperity was not built on the backs of slavery. All I have to do is look at the Civil War and see who had the big advantage and the big disadvantage. And the people who owned the slaves couldn't fight. They had no economy. This country's greatness and wealth was not built on the backs of slavery. Those facts are not facts. Those are falsehoods. And we have now taught 3, maybe 4 generations of our children to hate this country. And that is a damnable shame. That's a disaster. We should not be hiding the sins of the United States, because I can read the textbooks that were printed way back when too, that the left complains about. They're trying to say that slavery wasn't so bad. You're right. The South rose up after the Civil War and tried to act like they hadn't lost it. And they wrote a lot of those textbooks, and they taught a lot of people that America, oh, that's not such a big, that's a big deal. Slavery is a huge problem. The way we treated the Indians, a huge problem. We should never run away from these problems and these scars on America. But when looked at as a whole, America is a beautiful and wonderful place that has fed, housed, clothed, and brought freedom to more human beings than any government this world has ever seen. And the full story of the United States must be told. And that is the part of this conversation that never gets talked about. Both sides run to their corners and only want to discuss the side of the issue that makes them look good. And we need uncomfortable conversations. I'm ready to have them. We must once and for all put this subject behind us for it never to rear its ugly head again. But people don't want that. People make money and fame and power off this subject, and they're nothing but hustlers and pimps trying to gain a name for themselves by peddling falsehoods over this topic. And it makes me very angry. The last thing I'm going to say about it, and then I will be done. I want to live in a world where race doesn't matter, where I don't care what the color of your skin is any more than I care what the size of your shoe is. When I say that now, I'm called a racist. When I quote Dr. King and saying content of your character, not the color of your skin, that's racism nowadays, and that's ridiculous. You're trying to hide me, they'll say. You're trying to culturally appropriate. You're trying to put me away. No, I'm not. I don't want to put away our physical differences any more than I do the size of our shoes. Jeff, I can see you right now, and I could look at your skin color if I wanted to, and you mine. I have no idea what your shoe size is. I won't ask you. I'm not going to look the next time I see you in person. I don't care. There is no such thing as a size 9 community. That doesn't exist. But yet we talk about the Black community, Hispanic. I hate those phrases. I hate the phrase people of color. We don't talk about the people with size 8 shoes. Why do we not gravitate towards those physical differences? I'm not trying to. Now, your shoe size matters every once in a while, such as when you go to buy shoes. You then talk to the shoe salesman and say, hey, I'm a size 7.5. I'm a size 11. Now it matters. When it comes to matter, let's not be embarrassed to talk about it. Nobody thinks bad about it. We just do it. If you're lighting a picture, it's going to matter what people's skin color is. That's when you pay attention to it. If you're a doctor and you recognize, hey, these types of people are more prone to this disease, then I'm going to pay attention. But when I'm filing a job application, do you have to ask me what my race and ethnicity is? When I'm getting a loan, do you have to ask? That's ridiculous. We don't go, I want to live in that world. I want to live in the world where this color of our skin matters the same as the size of our shoes. People don't care. People don't think about it. And people aren't offended at the few. And we don't even, right now, we joke about race. I want to live in a world where that's not even joked about as a, oh, ha, ha, you know, you said something kind of racist. No, it just is a subject that shouldn't come up again any more than our shoe size. That's the national conversation I want to have and facilitate. Thank you for all this time. I really appreciate it.
It's no problem. And I could debate you all night too, not like against you mostly. But you know, like I said, I try to keep the local stuff off the national, so I don't alienate half my audience. But I will agree with you on the race relation stuff. It's, for me, a child of the 80s, army brat of two parents in the military overseas. It was about we're Americans, you know. We played with all races, all ages. I was 5 playing with 14, 16-year-olds. It didn't matter because it was our neighborhood and we went out and played every day. And then when I came back stateside, it was who had the Nintendo. I didn't care, you know, if you were Asian or white or whoever, who had the He-Man, who had the Ewok set, and who had the Nintendo. That's what was important to all of us. And then through the 90s, the same thing, video games, um, comic books, music was starting to merge this all of us together, you know, like, you know, racial appropriation of rap or whatever. But Eminem, for example, is one of the greatest rappers of all time. That was out of the 90s. And so it was surprising for me, this, like, I guess post Obama, through the Trump era, is this all of a sudden the topic. I even as recently heard in a community discussion where I was saying I don't see diversity. I mean, I don't see that our community is not diverse, and people were just scoffing me. I'm like, well, I don't look around my neighbors and look in that. I look at my neighbors as Texans and Kennedalians and Americans, and that's what's important to me. So that's my two comments on it, since it's my show. But and the Kennedale Observer says that I annoy them anyways when I talk in my show. But that's my 2 cents on that. And but I appreciate you coming out and doing the show real fast. And I just wanted to make, you know, since you're a local boy, I wanted to give you a chance to speak to your neighbors on your campaign, on the grassroots campaign that you're having. And good luck to you tomorrow. Any final comments? Where can people find more information about you, etc.?
They can go to Mizher.com. That's M-I-Z as in zebra, H-E-R.com. That's my website. It is, I will have my thoughts on a wide range of issues there. Not every subject is covered, nor is it a professionally done website. So don't expect too much, anybody going there, but you certainly will find what I think about things. And the best way to reach out to me, again, being so grassroots, I'm very accessible. Go to Adrian@Mizher.com. Again, Mizher is M-I-Z as in zebra, H-E-R. Adrian, A-D-R-I-A-N, @Mizher.com. Email me there. I've had several citizens email me, and I respond back, and that's the way to get to know me better.
So, and you do have like kind of like a thing going on to where if people post on social media a selfie of them next to your billboard, that there's a dinner with you. Is that still going on?
Yep, that is still going on.
Where's the billboard?
You have a pretty good chance of winning. There haven't been a whole lot of entrants, but yeah, if you go to my billboard, which is out at near 20 and 287, and if you want to email me, I'll give you the exact address so you can go there. Go get your picture taken in front of my billboard, hashtag it with Mizher for Congress, and tag me in the photo so I'll see it, and then you'll get entered into the drawing. It'll be your choice of where to go, my nickel, and I will take the winner to dinner.
Well, if it's my choice, it ain't gonna be a nickel. But again, Adrian, I appreciate you coming on the show, and good luck tomorrow on your early voting. Go knock on some doors, go stand out there and shake some hands.
Will do. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the time very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Kennedale, for all of you. This is Jeff Navarez from the Kennedale News. I have one more coffee chat this week for you, and I'll have it out in just a few days.